Welcome Home, a podcast for veterans, about veterans by veterans, is a project of Willing Warriors and the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run.
Good morning. I'm your host, Larry Ziliak, Director of Culinary Services here at the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run. And today we've got an amazing guest, a longtime friend of mine. We've been in the veteran service kind of sphere here around Northern Virginia for a long time, it seems. But Angela McConnell is here. She's the president of Nova Vets. And so welcome, Angela. I really appreciate you taking the time and come out to talk to us about Nova Vets and all the great work that you do.
Yeah, well, thank you, Larry. And I love the fact that we've been friends for so long. And we won't mention how many years, but it's always a pleasure seeing you in these veteran circles. And you are my favorite chef. I will say that as well. And just appreciate all your support over the year and your friendship.
Yeah, it's been a while, but it's great. And the best part about it is that over those years, we've seen our organization, your organization grow. And others that we partnered with, like Semper Canine and groups like that have also grown. As far as I can remember, none of them have really gone away, which is really an accomplishment. They've all made it through COVID.
Yes.
And adapted and changed, and they're all still here. I had Molly Brooks from Heroes Bridge out to talk to us recently, and we were both talking about the struggle that COVID was, and we'll get into a little bit about how it affected you guys, but tell us a little bit about how the organization came to be and what it does for veterans today.
Sure, absolutely. Well, it's been about 9 years, but I founded this organization in 2015. And it came to be because I was actually volunteering at other nonprofits, and specifically one that supported those medically retiring out of the military. So I was working with many times females that were getting medically discharged, and they could have needs anywhere from, I need someone to pet sit my dog while I'm in the hospital for 4 days. I have no family around, to I am transitioning off of Fort Belvoir, Quantico, and I need to find a house with accommodations. I need to find employment. I need to find legal services, just like a whole myriad of things. So it was my job as their mentor to be able to coordinate and find all these services and get them set up, because they were going through their medical issues and their treatments and sometimes legal issues as well, and their board, etc. And what I found really quick was that there was no one good place to go for, let's say, a female injured after or during 9/11, and now she needs these specific services and resource. There's no place to go for her holistically. And I just kept running into these issues. And the services I did find, it was just most of the time a very hard, convoluted process to get them registered, get the applications filled out, and get the service to them. And I just kept thinking, as a veteran, 22 years, I'm retired myself, there's got to be an easier way. Our veterans, especially ones that are going through so many struggles currently, they need, better service than what I'm finding. And that kind of, spurred my interest in trying to establish a nonprofit. I was volunteering at the Prince William Chamber of Commerce. And they are fabulous. And I established the Veterans Council there. And I was thinking maybe we could do some of these things within the chamber. And it just got to where the chamber was business focused with veteran-owned businesses. And I wanted to do so many other things. And I branched out. 2015, we started.
Right. And so tell us a little bit about your military background.
Sure. Well, very young age, signed up. My dad happily signed those paperwork very early when I was 17 years old, and went into the delayed entry program for the U.S. Army. 1987, I started boot camp, Fort Jackson. Went through that as an E1. And I went E1 to E5 in 2 years. I was a super hard charger in the research field. Got my NCO and worked at Walter Reed and the Uniformed Services University. Loved doing that support work within research. Then 9/11, not 9/11. Oh, Desert Storm happened. I'm back way up. That was my first conflict. Desert Storm, you might be familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And I was held over for about 6 months, and I was making a decision: do I stay in? And I decided just to go into the Army Reserves. Did that. Really missed the military. Got back in Army National Guard, North Carolina, class OC-37. Got my commission. Then transferred into the intelligence community, and I was there ever since.
Right.
Did a lot of great counterterrorism work, intelligence work, and transferred to the Air Force Reserve a few years later and retired out of the Air Force Reserve.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite a tour of all the services there, back and forth. Wow. What about a medical background? I do know that you do have take a more of a holistic approach to that kind of thing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I do teach part-time for George Washington University in the Department of Integrative Medicine under their School of Medicine, and that is a person-centric approach, looking at the whole person, looking at all the systems of the body, and not just your heart and not just your kidney, but
Sure.
the whole person. And what drove me to really finding a fascination in this holistic approach and the need for it was a condition that my son was born with, a genetic condition. And I was under the military medical system at the time. And I just remembered, because it's so rare, we were going to multiple specialists. They weren't collaborating. One was telling me to do one thing with my son, and at the time he was 2. And another specialist was saying, oh, no, don't give him that. Give him this to drink with the medicines and different things. And I'm like, why is this so convoluted? We're within one military system.
Sure.
These specialists should be talking to one another. And that's when I started researching on my own: integrative, person-centered care, holistic care, complementary therapies, whatever you want to call it. The idea is you put this person and their family at the center of care. You look at all of their systems, and that could be mind, body, spirit, all of it. It makes us whole.
Mm-hmm.
And then you focus on, what they need, whether that's traditional, medicines and surgeries, or complementing therapies, behavioral health, what makes them feel good, what do they need to eat,
Mm-hmm.
how do they need to increase their activities, possibly, like all of these things that really improve our quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of got me that system, along with my intelligence background. And that, again, you're looking at multiple systems to get that good picture of what's going on the ground, so you can get the information to our troops in a way that they can use it. It's multiple systems, and that's the way it is in integrative medicine, and that's the way it is with Nova Veterans Association. It's the whole person. We work with hundreds of service providers, including willing warriors. All of these great services and resources for our veterans we need to know about, because without you guys, we couldn't be coordinating care.
Mm-hmm.
What the general population doesn't know is that our veterans can't find you guys on their own, and that's what we do.
So I've always thought that the real benefit to having Nova Vets in the Veteran Service Organization community is that you guys have always acted as a clearinghouse for veterans who have different issues. And I know that when I hear from Faith in the office, or Diane says, I got a call from a veteran and he needed this, I say, tell him to call Nova Vets. Tell him to call Nova Vets, because not only do they have an intake procedure and are very good with working with veterans to not only deal with the issue that they call about, but then to find out about all the other issues that they have. And I'm guessing that rarely when they call, they only have one issue. And so we refer a tremendous amount of people to you all because it's just, you're the only organization in the area that does this. And you're right, it's brutal when you've got to go to this organization there to get that, to do this over there, to do, and then even sometimes you got to call somebody in Maryland to get something done. So talk to us a little bit about the procedures and the way that intake and the way that you offer services to veterans.
Yes, well, it's been an evolution and process with regards to our intake. We want to ask enough questions to understand all the aspects that may be contributing to a veteran's livelihood, health, quality of life. So it's about 200 data points probably altogether. And we're asking them everything from, where they served, because that's very important when it comes to health conditions, to their income level, to do they have family around or friends that can support them, which is critical a lot of times, and especially if they do not have that support. We want to know if they have any, emotional issues or things that they're struggling with. And so it's everything from income to service time to how are they feeling. And a lot of the times, a veteran may come to us, like you said, like with one issue. It's like, I need food on my table. I can't afford I can't have food. And we make sure through our intake that they're safe, that they have food on the table, that their utilities are getting paid if these are the most urgent priorities. And then we come back around and we look at, do they need help with finances? Do they need to live in a home within their means? Some of them are very elderly and they may be needing to transition from being at home into an assisted type of living community. Or if they want to stay at home, we have some great veteran services where they'll come in the home and take care of them, and the VA will pay for some of this if they're registered and qualified for the VA. So the intake, yes, very, very comprehensive. And I think that's where other organizations may do things differently, because we need to know all of these things, because it's not just meeting their basic needs. After we do that, we want to make sure we improve their quality of life.
Sure.
It's like, hey, are you getting out to, an American Legion to hang out, maybe play bingo and socialize? Do you want to volunteer? Do you want to go back to work? I mean, what do you need to improve your quality of life and your family's quality of life? Because it doesn't stop with just getting food on your table. To us, it's the whole veteran.
Sure. What's the number one or sort of the top couple of issues that you find veterans are calling with?
Some of the biggest issues are transportation, especially to healthcare appointments. And that has a lot of reasons around, why they can't use public transportation. Either they're elderly, they can't, manage to get to a bus stop or a metro. Income, they can't afford it. We have dozens of veteran ride programs in the area. However, usually there's like a 2-week waiting period to scheduling. So like if they go to a VA appointment in DC or Valvor, and they have to be seen the next day or in a couple days, then the veteran is stuck and it's like, oh, I can't even get back in for my follow-up.
Right.
So the transportation has always been a big issue from day one with us, and us trying to work with multiple ride programs, and them just can meet the needs some of the time, but definitely not all the time.
Right.
So that is one of the programs that we took on ourselves. We got a grant with the Dulce Area Transportation Association, and we were able to provide transportation for about 1.5 years. And it was so needed that we used our grant money up in half the time.
Oh, wow.
And so now we're continuing to look for grant money for this ride program, because not having enough money, not feeling safe, getting into an Uber, not having a phone to order an Uber. There are just so many barriers.
Hard to order an Uber with a flip phone.
Exactly. Our landline, right?
Wow.
So transportation is one big one. Getting and following up on their healthcare appointments, that leads back to transportation, but that's also a technology barrier. We have a lot of great MyChart programs for when you can get in yourself and, look at your doctor's appointment and see when the follow-ups are. You have to be able to get into your emails. You have to be able to get onto the internet. So MyChart and other electronic health record systems and notifications and correspondence, that health technology piece is huge. Again, coming to us so we can do this for them is one of the big things. And then just utilities and having some of those basic needs met. Utilities, especially when it gets super cold out, like we're coming upon winter now.
Sure.
And having food on the table.
Yeah, food insecurity too. I've found is a problem just across the board for a lot of people, but for veterans too. Sometimes the biggest problem that veterans have is that they won't ask for help.
Yes.
And you sort of have to cajole and just kind of really work with them to get them to accept some help. I think COVID really hit us hard, and I'm very curious as to how you guys worked through that. because so much of the work that you do is directly with the veteran. So, take us back to late 2019, early 2020, and now COVID has hit, and everybody's going to stay home for a week, and then we should be good.
Yes, that was it. That was the ideal thought at the time. Yeah.
And now, where was Nova Vets that week and after?
Yeah, so again, like it hit so many communities very hard, especially those that, help this underserved and very vulnerable population. We started thinking quickly about what our veterans, many of them are kind of stuck in the home. They can't get out well on their own. What are going to be their needs? Because telehealth wasn't going to work for them, most of them, because they don't have the computers and they're not able to use it. Transportation definitely wasn't working. So any volunteer transportation organization had stopped.
Yeah.
Then, of course, you have them super scared of this COVID virus and being exposed. So not wanting to even, not only not going out to get food, but not wanting to have it delivered was an issue. And what we decided to do after, this wasn't ending in a week was to go back and start a marketing campaign, an outreach campaign to all of our partners to please let their veterans know that if they need help, especially during this time, whether that's food, whether that's getting to a doctor's appointment or just trying to correspond with your doctor, any of these really impactful situations, if they're happening to have their veterans contact us. So we started a huge outreach campaign. The other thing we did is, and we do this regularly, if there's something happening in the community, like now we're looking at the PACT Act, which is a different story we can talk about, but with COVID, we're like, we are going to call and email every veteran that we've ever helped. And this is not unusual necessarily, but it was an unusual pandemic. So we had different questions we were going to ask. Are you getting food delivered? Do you need help with your mortgage? Because there's the whole forbearance, program in place. And some of them were being edged out when they didn't have to be. The same with rent. A lot of times in property management, the renters were being edged out. Our veterans, we kind of understand the social determinants of health because we ask all these questions on our intake. And if they're living like in a controlled rent place or someplace we know that this is all they can afford and it's a shelter, if they get kicked out, many didn't know that they were allowed to stay, and not have to pay their rent. So we kind of like doubled up, tripled up on our efforts to reach out to them before they felt like they had to be on the street. And some of them remember us and they will call us back and they'll keep coming back, which is fabulous. It's the best situation, but some of them don't always remember, or maybe they've called 20 different organizations and they can't remember that you're the one that was able to reach back and help them with these things. So that's why we do the follow-up, and we do that from time to time, and we'll do it again regarding the PACT Act and potential environmental exposures.
And at any given time, what's the number of the population that you serve directly through Nova Vets? How many veterans are you working with?
Wow, so that's a great question. We look at the numbers of veterans, and above and beyond that, because we can say, okay, we served over 5,000 veterans in the last 8 years, but we've helped and worked on over 100,000 cases, because we'll have a veteran that comes in, maybe they need food. Well, that's one specific area, and we're reaching out to multiple food banks. So that's one case for us.
Right.
And then they also need help with financial counseling. That's a whole nother avenue. And they also need help with potential homelessness, and they need to find another place. Well, that's a whole nother avenue of service providers. So we have multiple cases going many times for each veteran. So, hundreds and hundreds of cases, I would say thousands and thousands of cases and hundreds of veterans that we're supporting over time, because it's never just, as you said, it's never just one thing.
Right.
We wish it was. And sometimes over time, where we would ask about emotional support or possibly problem sleeping and things that may be a cue to our support service staff as to this person may be depressed, maybe is in the range of hopelessness, potentially suicidal,
Mm-hmm.
many times it'll take a few conversations with our case manager support services before the veteran opens up, because they're a proud population,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they aren't necessarily going to say, I need mental health support. I want a peer support program. They may not even know about it, but they definitely may not say it until they have a relationship and that trust built with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we do that very well. Because they know we're there for them. We
Mm-hmm.
pick up the phone after a day, we call back. We don't leave veterans hanging, and we don't send them off with multiple phone numbers or links.
I hear a lot that I don't really need that service because there's other veterans who are worse off than me. And, I was a Vietnam era veteran. I was in Germany, so I'm not really a Vietnam veteran, or I was only in for 2 years, so I'm not really a veteran. I don't know. I have health insurance. I don't need to go to the VA. I mean, it's just a myriad of excuses. They all deserve these services. Talk about the PAC Act, because this is huge for veterans. There's now so many presumptive conditions for which they can get treatment and compensation. And it's really just a matter of getting them signed up for it. So has there been an increase in inquiries about it to your organization since it passed earlier this year?
Yes and no. And I'm going to back up to your last statement about veterans not recognizing themselves, because I think that's a critical piece of the PACT Act and treatment and to help other veterans. And we do have veterans that we identify and we start working with, and they feel they're taking something away from another veteran because they're getting the service or they're getting the treatment. And what we try to impress is that you're in actuality helping the next veteran, because if you don't register yourself with the VA, and if they don't know that you were exposed to the toxic water at Camp Lejeune, or radium at another, military base. If the VA doesn't know that and they can't quantify that and have that record, then the veteran behind you with the same issue may not be recognized or support. So, filling out the registry for the burn pit if you're exposed to burn pits, maybe if you don't have any issues right now, that's fine. You can still get on the registry. You might later, hopefully not, but we want to be able to take care of you if you do.
I always tell veterans two things. One is you want to register with the VA because the more veterans that register with the VA, the more funding the VA gets from Congress, and because they need the money to support those veterans, number one. Number two is go ahead and make a claim for everything that you have wrong with you. And it's okay to, when you get out of the service, you make your claim, you get denied, maybe you'll get a 0 rating, but now you're on, there's a baseline, because I guarantee you what you think doesn't bother you now, when you get to be my age, it's going to bother you. And now you just reapply and you'll probably get automatic coverage. But certainly with hearing, that's a big one.
For sure.
So I encourage all these young service members who are separating to go to the VA, make a claim, and get denied. But now you're in their record system, and they have a baseline. And in the end, it's just benefits everybody to get as many of them as registered as possible. What's been the response that you get from the veterans after they're registered? Are the claims being processed quickly, fairly? I know I made a claim for high blood pressure because I had an exposure issue, and I got a 0 rating, and it's like, well, because I didn't meet the criteria of having high blood pressure over a certain amount of time, and it's because I'm on medication, and it actually works. So I'm a little confused with the VA right now, going back and forth, saying, do I have to come off of medication so the doctor can see my high blood pressure, risk some sort of health emergency because of it, just so you'll believe that I have high blood pressure? It's kind of crazy.
It is.
So I kind of know that there's a lot of veterans out there, when they hear, oh, if it's a presumptive condition, as long as you have it, you're gonna get a rating. Yeah, you might get a rating, but it might not be what you think. What's the experience your veterans have had with the PAC Act?
Well, I do want to say, with regards to any veteran, whether they come through us or they go out on their own, to please seek a trained professional when they go to file their claim. If you go through the VA system and you start checking boxes and putting information out there, you may not even come close to what you deserve, because there's the federal code of regulation. There are certain terms that are required. There are certain lengths of time that you have to put down as to having a condition. You have to link it to your service time, and there are trained individuals to help you do that within the Disabled American Vets. Many veteran service organizations like VFWs and American Legions have trained people able to help you work through those legal terms and that filing. So that's the first thing.
And all of those services are free.
All of those services.
Do not pay anybody to do this for you.
I would say do not pay, even though there may be people and businesses approaching you saying, we'll get you a rating, or, we don't get our money. I would say go to a free organization and get that help, because they are trained and they are certified. They have to go through this certification process to help you. So I'll say that's the number one thing. With regards to the PAC Act, the word on the street is they've denied, I believe it was like 2/3 of the claims that have come through. And so it's being re-looked at. Our veterans that come through and they want to either file for the first time or refile, do an amended claim. We're working with a few. We're in the process of working with a few that have come to us. But what we try to do is actually work with the healthcare providers in the civilian sector, not the ones at the CBOCs like Fort Belvoir or the hospitals, but civilian providers. We want them to ask on their patient intake, have you ever served in the U.S. military? Not, are you a veteran? Because some people don't identify, even though they've been deployed or they've been in the service for a number of years. But we want the healthcare providers to put, have you ever served in the U.S. military? And then ask the follow-on questions. Where did you serve? For how long? Because the PAC Act is all about environmental exposures.
At particular locations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So physicians need to know this information. Now, NOVA veterans, we have a civilian healthcare provider training program for this specifically. So they'll ask the questions and then they'll know what the resources are. Because it's one thing to check the block, I've served, I'm a U.S. military veteran, but it's the next step where the provider says, okay, where did you serve? What resources might you need? So those are the other pieces that we provide the healthcare provider. So we're kind of doing it from both angles. We're doing it from the healthcare provider, civilian healthcare provider side, because, community clinics we're working with. We're working with free clinics. We're working with care in the community providers, which are those that have a contract with the VA to provide health care, and then just your providers in general, because some veterans may not see a veteran-aligned provider at all. They may not have TRICARE retired or Champus, and they're just out there in the community. So we try to approach it from that angle, and then from the individual veterans angle. When they come to us, we have them work with a trained filing officer to be able to get their ailments and illnesses and issues stated correctly, and hopefully, in return, have a proper and accurate disability claim.
Right.
Oh, and let me say one more thing about disability. Okay, so it's the Veterans Disability Program. And you said you felt like you almost had to get off your blood pressure medicine just so they would recognize your issue. It should be the Veterans Ability Program, not Disability Program, because they're literally incentivizing someone to stay sick and injured, because if you get better, then you're not going to get help.
Right.
And it's just backwards. They should incentivize people to get better, to get your knees back in healthier shape, to get your blood pressure regulated. But instead, they're like, no, we're not going to list that as an issue because, you're taking medicine, you're becoming more active, you're taking care of yourself. So, you don't meet, you don't meet that disability criteria. It's just such a backward system.
Yeah, it's pretty aggravating for sure.
It's very frustrating.
Yeah. So looking forward, for NOVA vets, if somebody walked up and said, here's a check for $1 million, what program, what service would you like to provide that you don't provide today?
Oh, wow. Well, hallelujah. Then that happens. Not if, it's when. We have very skilled, trained support service staff, and they usually come to us with backgrounds in nursing, counseling, case management, those types. They have to be very patient. They have to know how to work with an elderly and vulnerable veteran population. So what we would do is, one, we'd increase our ability to do outreach. The hardest thing to do is identify this veteran that's usually isolated in their home, marginalized because they can't advocate and reach out and help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be able to find this population. And we do it through community partners like you all.
Mm-hmm.
But so a really focused campaign to identify and find these veterans so we can provide these free services, and bringing on, the staff to support them. As a nonprofit, we don't get funding like a for-profit business, as you well know.
Yeah.
Foundations, many of the time, do not recognize what we do as a service, even though it is the only way our veterans can receive services is if they go through us and we help them one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
And we understand their individualized needs. We understand their accommodations. Either we have to speak louder, we have to repeat things, we have to call and follow up because they can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
We know all of these about our veterans, and we know they're not able to get these services. And for some reason, this bridge that we create and these barriers that we dissolve are not recognized by these larger foundations. So having donors and donations is one of our primary means of, continuing our service
Mm-hmm.
until foundations start to realize that we're about inclusivity and equity. There's all of these services equally provided, but if our veterans can't get to them, what's the point?
Yeah.
So we bring that equity piece to the forefront. That's what we do differently. And if we had that $1 million, I guarantee you we'd be able to find more of these veterans that are suffering in their home. We'd bring down this enormously, ridiculously high suicide rate of our elderly veteran population, which is higher than our younger veteran populations. A lot of people don't know that. We would bring down that suicide rate. We would help these veterans that are hopeless and struggling in their homes, and just improve their quality of life. That's what we want to do, and we would just be able to do that on a grander scale.
Mm-hmm. So until that day, there are other folks out there that can donate varying amounts.
Mm-hmm.
So direct them to your webpage.
Sure, it's novavets.org. It's like our full legal name is the Northern Virginia Veterans Association. We narrow that down to novavets.org, and there is a donation button there. There's an address if people like to mail checks, and we're happy to work with them. There's a lot of wonderfully wealthy people and veterans as well that want to give back, and they can divert some of the retirement income so they don't have to pay taxes on them.
There you go.
They can divert that, right into Nova Vets, a 501c3 nonprofit, get the write-off, and feel very good about the help that they're giving.
Mm-hmm. And if a veteran needs assistance, or anyone who knows a veteran that needs assistance, what's the best way for them to reach out and contact you?
So our main number's on the website as well, novavets.org. So that's the best way. They can call or they can send an email, and we'll respond within 24 hours, get back with them. That's one of our greatest compliments. It's like, wow, you actually call me back.
Yeah.
So we are very responsive. They can definitely reach out and do that, and we'll be in contact with them.
Great. Well, I encourage all our listeners to visit the webpage, learn more about what they're doing, and donate. Give whatever you can. Hit that donate button. It's not going to kill you, and help other veterans because the work that they do, there's no other organization in the area doing it quite like they do. And they're always there. They've always been there when we've referred veterans to them. And we really need to make sure that they're always there in the future. And so please visit the webpage, donate. If you know a veteran that needs some services or is struggling, or you suspect they might have some emotional or mental health issues, especially if they're at a high risk you feel for suicide, please get in touch with Nova Vets and get that veteran in touch with with them and their caseworkers, because you could save a life.
Definitely.
And that's so important today. Angela, I really appreciate you coming out and talking to us today. This has just been great. And I knew Nova Vets was a great organization, but now everybody else knows it too.
And that's wonderful. And Larry, thank you so much for having me. Always love to see you, no matter where it is. So I appreciate the invitation and speaking with you.
Well, thank you. And for our listeners, if you have any questions or suggestions, you can reach us at podcast@willingwarriors.org. And we'll have another episode next Monday at 5 a.m. So thanks for listening.
Thank you.
The Welcome Home podcast is brought to you by Willing Warriors, a nonprofit organization serving active duty service members and veterans since 2012. To learn more, please visit our webpage at willingwarriors.org.